Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about large companies and revenue. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, as a software engineer who is working in a large company, how do you know if the software that you are developing is really helping the company make revenue? Um, Either you have to read between the lines, and I suggest that that is a skill that you adopt quickly because it is the mark of true genius, in my opinion. People who are very smart and understand how to use their brain rather than just sort of go through the motions of doing things. Or you're gonna have to look at the bigger picture, in my opinion. So let me break that down for you a little bit. So when I talk about the bigger picture, it is important for you to understand that the really large companies, guys, they don't just make their money from the products that you are making. They are making money from the stock market. They're usually more, or like they usually have a few big earners, if that makes sense. And in many cases, as a software developer, you might not be working on the next big product, but you are contributing in maintaining a happy user base. And this is where it gets really complicated and it's almost impossible for you. It's sort of like trying to, in a sense, it's sort of like trying to understand how you at a personal level, as just an individual, you personally, how much of a carbon footprint do you have on the planet? How much are you contributing to, I don't know, racism or pollution or the economy or so forth? You can't really trace yourself and your actions accurately through this vast network of things that are going on. But what you can do is to look at the whole picture and look at the telltale signs of how the company is doing. And then, of course, then brings us to the reading between the lines. But take an example of these sorts of like really large corporations that you might know of that have, in some cases, really large portfolios of different projects. Do you actually know which products are the big earners in your company? Usually people don't know that. They have no idea. And so when you are working on something that is not on one of those big earners, you are in many cases working on something that is supporting those big earners or might be the next up and coming thing. It's sort of up to you to figure out what that's going to be. As an example, I have worked on many different projects, with a few of them being for some of the largest companies in the world. And on a few occasions, I've been working on experimental stuff where the company is just throwing a few millions at this project, not because it is the thing that is making them the most amount of revenue at this time, but rather because they see that in order for other departments to be able to scale or for the overall brand of the company to continue growing, they have to do something in this area. So they hire people to sort of fix it or to expand on some type of functionality or so forth and so forth. And in some cases I've been working on the main project where literally if that thing goes away, the entire company collapses because it is the thing that they are making, that's where all of the cash is coming from. And you can identify that by understanding the company's business model, how, like I said, the big picture, where are they getting their money from, and what part of the system is closest tied to that revenue. And as I said, in the really large organizations, it is really down, especially the big IT companies where they have like many products. You're basically going to have to look at the different products, and their company might publish reports of revenue for the different systems, and then you sort of have to trace. It's the same thing as I was saying. You are a node in that network usually, and you need to figure out which part of the network are you affecting with the work that you are doing. The other thing that I think is more interesting, which for me is something that not that many people usually do, is but it's a very critical skill, I think, for smart people, and that is to read between the lines. and actually see things and see the correlation between things rather than just to look at what people are telling you. Because in today's society, and it's probably always been that sort of way, guys, there's always a vested interest in, you know, portraying things with a narrative that benefits you. So when you listen to, you know, the CEO, or when you listen to different organizations who are telling you this and that, it's very good to hear it directly from the horse's mouth, like sort of how their perspective on things are. But it's better for you to do your own thinking. And an example is that I've been working in companies where they just keep on saying that everything is going swimmingly, and then you go and check the revenue report, and they have been reporting severe losses for years. Nothing. They have made no money. They've just lost money for years and years, yet everything is going swimmingly. And in some cases you work on pieces of the system where, like, I've worked on parts of a system where literally I know exactly how many customers they have. I'm not allowed to talk about that, of course, but I know that when they go and talk to another customer, because of this way where, like, our commitment is to the company and not to, you know, human decency, they are bullshitting customers into signing up with them, and in many cases doing everything but lying to them about how much money they're making, etc., etc. But since I sit on the systems that actually make most of their money, I know how many people are in the database. I know how many transactions, or like how much of this is actually happening, because I'm an engineer. And engineers are usually, if you're in the right department, you actually know all of these sorts of things. This is one of the reasons why software companies are very, like, you know, you sign a lot of papers and, like, you know, copyright infringements and so forth, because it's really difficult to write meaningful software without having someone sort of, it's like, you know, how military or like spies or anything like that, you have classified information, and the governments or like the different organizations, they need you to collect this information, but they also have to stop you from misusing that and telling somebody else. So how do they do that? It's the same thing for our software developers or people who working in pharmaceuticals. It's also the sort of thing where, oh, we need you to use your, like, all your education and brain to use all the stuff that we pay for, so that you can make something that we then own, but we can't have you sharing that with anybody else, even though it might, you know, have other benefits or, well, consequences as well as of course. But that is the thing that I usually look at the most, because it's not that difficult to figure out which projects are making money and which projects are not making money if you just look at what the reports, or like the revenue reports, are talking about for each of, depending on how big the company is, and what you are actually seeing within the system. That way you can correlate it. It's sort of, you know, rather than just listening to somebody tell you what the numbers are, you can actually go and check them yourself, because you have the skills to do so. So what I want you to take away from this is that it's very difficult to know how much you are helping in a large company in terms of revenue, but it's good for you to always have that larger picture type of perspective. Sometimes you are helping or sometimes you're working on experimental stuff, and then you might not be helping at all. It's just a bet. You might completely fail, but the companies that are this large, they usually have such enormous amounts of money that they can basically buy another company and just see if it works out, and if not, hey, it's just a loss, because it's like nothing to them. But they still have to innovate, just as you and I have to innovate at smaller. If we work at smaller companies need to innovate as well. It's just that you don't have the budget to do like these really big things. Usually you have to do things that are a little bit smaller. And so if you're in those sort of experimental stages, it's almost always that either you make something that really becomes like a new product and it actually starts making revenue, or it unblocks something, makes something more effective, or it might just raise the stock market value of the company's brand, which is also money. And if you really want to figure out how much money your company, like how much you're contributing, it's really important for you to understand where you are in the network of all the things that are happening, and then actually look at how things are working, because usually if you compare the reports of, like, because the companies have to report how much money they're making, and if you can look at the reports that are relevant to your area of the company, you can start to see a correlation between how are things actually working on the inside and how are people doing work and how the system is actually behaving and how much money are you actually making, and then you can sort of derive how much you are contributing to the overall revenue. Have a great day.